Hey everyone, tonight we are going to embark on a journey back in time, not to mighty battles or grand emperors, but to the mess tent, the cooking fire, and the humble, often surprisingly bland diet of a Roman legionary. Imagine, if you will, the dust motes dancing in the shafts of light, piercing the canvas of your tent, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the low murmur of Latin voices, and the distinct, ever-present aroma of, well, largely gruel. You're a fresh recruit, perhaps a farm boy from Gaul or a city lad from Rome itself, and you've just signed up for what you think is glory. You probably won't survive this, but at least your stomach will be full, even if your taste buds are in a perpetual state of quiet rebellion. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now as we prepare for this culinary expedition into the past. Don't forget to like and follow the channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming historical adventures. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the coarse wool of your tunic against your skin, the unfamiliar weight of your kit, and the gnawing emptiness in your stomach that only a day of endless marching and drill can bring. As a newly minted legionary, you're quickly discovering that military life is less about heroic charges and more about routine discipline and a diet that makes your grandmother's cooking seem like a Michelin-starred feast. Your first few days are a blur of shouting centurions' blistered feet and a growing realization that the tales of Roman banquets you heard back home were wildly exaggerated when it came to the common soldier. You were probably expecting hearty stews, bubbling over open fires, brimming with wild boar and exotic spices, but the reality hitting your palate is, shall we say, a little more rustic. The initial shock isn't just the sheer volume of work, it's the uniformity of the food. Every meal, every day, seems to revolve around a surprisingly narrow range of ingredients. There's no complaining, of course. Complaining gets you extra duties, or worse, a visit from the vine staff. You quickly learn to appreciate the calories, the sustained energy, even if the flavor profile hovers somewhere between earthy and just filling. This isn't about pleasure, it's about fuel for the machine. And you, my friend, are now a cog in that vast, efficient, and frankly somewhat bland Roman war machine. The first time you see the morning's offering, you might squint, wondering if there's been some mistake. Where are the succulent cuts of meat, the fresh fruit? Instead, it's a thick, almost porridge-like substance, steaming in a communal pot. This, you're told, is pulmentum, and it's going to be your best friend, or perhaps your most persistent culinary antagonist for the foreseeable future. Historians still argue whether the consistency varied wildly from legion to legion, or if there was a standard universally unexciting recipe. What is clear, however, is that this wasn't designed for gourmet appeal. It was designed for sustenance. You watch as the more experienced soldiers, veterans with sun-weathered faces and a weary acceptance in their eyes, ladle out their portions with practiced ease. They don't grumble, they simply eat, shoveling it down with an efficiency that suggests they've long since transcended the need for taste. You try your first spoonful, it's warm certainly. Filling undeniably. Flavorful. Well, it tastes like grains, boiled grains, perhaps with a hint of something else, something vaguely vegetal, but mostly just the wholesome, unadulterated essence of wheat or barley. You quickly learn that this pulmentum is the bedrock of your diet, a dietary constant around which all other rarer, more exciting. And I use that word loosely, foodstuffs revolve. It's the culinary equivalent of your marching boots, essential, sturdy, and not something you'd ever choose to wear to a party. You might recall the luxurious breakfasts back home, perhaps a fig or two, some fresh bread, maybe even a bit of cheese. That memory now feels like a distant, extravagant dream. Welcome to the Legion, where every day is leg day and every meal is gruel day. That thick, unappetizing gruel, your pulmentum, isn't just some culinary punishment dreamt up by a sadistic quartermaster. Oh no, it's a precisely engineered energy delivery system. You might grimace at its blandness, but your body constantly expending calories on drills marches, and the sheer effort of existing in a military camp absolutely devours it. It's primarily made from chandi cereal grains, usually wheat or barley boiled down to a thick, almost paste-like consistency. Sometimes there might be a whisper of legumes, some lentils, perhaps a few chickpeas thrown in for good measure, adding a much-needed protein boost. This wasn't about culinary delight. It was about efficiency and sustained energy release. You quickly notice that after a bowl of pulmentum, you don't get that sudden sugar rush followed by an inevitable crash. Instead, it's a slow, steady release of fuel, keeping you going through a long morning of trench digging or shield practice. It's the ancient equivalent of a slow-carb diet meticulously designed to power a human engine. Your muscles might ache, your feet might burn, but your stomach at least feels adequately fueled. It's less a meal and more a chatpor nutritional obligation. The preparation itself is shockingly simple. No fancy techniques, no delicate seasoning. Just boiling water grains and time. On campaign, it's often cooked in large communal cauldrons. Over an open fire, the smoke stinging your eyes as you wait for your turn. You learn to appreciate the warmth it provides on a cold morning, even if you can't bring yourself to truly enjoy the taste. Sometimes, if you're lucky, there might be a bit of vegetable matter mixed in, perhaps some dried leeks or a handful of wild greens gathered by the foraging party. But these are additions, not core ingredients. The grain is king. You might even find yourself developing a strange sort of Stockholm syndrome with your pulmentum. After days, weeks, months of it, your body starts to crave its familiar, albeit unexciting, sustenance. The thought of something richer, more flavorful, almost feels alien. Historians still argue whether the soldiers truly found it palatable over time, or if they simply resigned themselves to its necessity. Some texts suggest a grudging acceptance, others a deep-seated loathing. What is certain is its ubiquity, and remember that sense of uniformity. It extends to almost everything. The bowls you eat from are likely simple, earthenware, or perhaps carved wood quickly cleaned and stacked for the next meal. There's no personalization, no individual flourishes. Every man eats the same thing from the same kind of vessel at roughly the same time. It's a reminder of your place in the vast impersonal hierarchy of the Legion. You are a unit, a cog, and your fuel is standardized. You might occasionally see a veteran, a grizzled old-timer, pull out a small pouch and sprinkle something over his pulmentum. It's usually salt or perhaps a pinch of dried herbs if he's managed to acquire some on the march. A tiny act of defiance against the monotony, a desperate attempt to inject some personality into a meal utterly devoid of it. You eye him enviously, wishing you had such foresight, or perhaps just a piece of cheese. A particularly quirky tidbit is the occasional mention of Mocha vinegar being added to pulmentum, not for flavor, but for its purported ability to ward off scurvy and other ailments, a rudimentary understanding of its vitamin C content. Imagine, if you will, pulmentum with a sour kick, definitely an acquired taste. So, as you scrape the last of the viscous gruel from your bowl, you understand. This isn't just breakfast or lunch or dinner. This is the foundation of your strength, the literal bedrock upon which the entire Roman military machine is built. Without this constant influx of simple carbohydrates, the legion would grind to a halt. It might be bland, it might be boring, but it is undeniably effective. While pulmentum might be the soul of your daily sustenance. Bread. Glorious bread is undoubtedly its heart. You don't get light, airy loaves baked with delicate crusts. Oh no, your daily bread ration is a hefty, dense, and often quite hard affair made for durability and nutrition, not for a leisurely brunch. This isn't the sort of bread you'd tear apart and dip in olive oil at a villa. It's the kind you'd probably use to bludgeon a troublesome barbarian if necessary. And you get a lot of it. The average legionary's daily ration was substantial, often consisting of around 2-3 pounds of grain per day, much of which would be consumed in this form. You'll quickly learn that this isn't pre-baked, ready-to-eat bread that magically appears at your mess. On campaign especially, the process of getting bread to your belly is a hands-on, often laborious one. The grain, usually hotoba wheat or barley, arrives in sacks transported by the very supply lines you rely on. Sometimes it's already ground into flour, but just as often it arrives as whole kernels, meaning a new chore for you and your comrades. Milling. Imagine the scene: you're in camp after a long march, your muscles screaming, and now you're tasked with grinding grain using a hand mill or mola manuaria. Cuisine. It's a tedious, repetitive task, pushing the upper stone against the lower, feeling the friction and the slow, steady progress as the kernels are crushed into flour. This isn't glamorous work, but it's absolutely vital. The groan of the millstones, the fine dust coating everything, the ache in your arms. It all becomes part of the soundtrack of camp life. Historians still argue whether every legionary was expected to participate equally in milling or if it was rotated among specific cohorts. What is clear is that the sheer volume of grain consumed by a legion meant this was a constant activity. Once the flour is ready, it's mixed with water and sometimes a bit of salt to form a basic dough. Leavening agents like yeast might be added, if available, leading to a slightly lighter, though still dense loaf. More often, it's an unleavened bread. A flat bread that's quicker to prepare and more resilient. You learn to appreciate these small differences. A slightly leavened loaf feels like a luxury after days of hardtack-like discs. Then comes the baking. You don't have ovens in the field, not proper ones anyway. Instead, ingenuity is key. Sometimes the dough is simply flattened and baked on a hot stone over the coals of a fire, yielding a tough, smoky flatbread. Other times, you might see contubernium, your 8-man tent group members, digging a small pit, building a fire in it to heat the earth, then raking out the coals and burying the dough directly in the hot ground, covered with embers and ash. This primitive earth oven pressed-out chauffe method yields a surprisingly decent result, albeit with a dusty crust. A particularly quirky tidbit is the method of baking dough on the inside walls of a large pot placed over a fire, allowing the flatbread to cook evenly. This bread isn't just food, it's also your primary source of quick energy on the march. You break off chunks and chew them as you trudge along the dry, fibrous texture, giving your jaw a workout. It's dense enough to carry well-resistant to mold for a surprising amount of time and provides the bulk of your caloric intake. Forget your delicate pastries. This is the real staff of life for a Roman soldier. It's the constant companion to your pulmentum, forming the solid core of almost every meal. You might grumble about its monotony, but you never question its necessity. Without it, the legion simply would not march. Having established pulmentum as your daily energy booster and bread as your enduring sustenance, you might wonder about the lighter side of a legionary's diet. Surely there were Bond's vegetables. Chef bean, vibrant and fresh to balance out the monotonous grains. The reality you quickly discover is somewhat less colorful than you might hope. While vegetables were indeed part of the Roman diet, their variety and availability for the common soldier on campaign were often severely limited, dictated more by logistics and local foraging than by culinary preference. Your vegetable intake primarily consists of whatever can be easily grown dried or acquired without much fuss. Think hearty, long-lasting options, not delicate greens. Cabbage, for instance, makes a frequent appearance. It's robust, grows relatively quickly, and can be consumed raw, cooked, or even fermented to extend its shelf life. You'll become intimately familiar with the slightly sulfuric aroma of boiled cabbage, a smell that seems to cling to the very air of the camp. Onions and garlic. Sharp and pungent are also staples. They're not just for flavor. They're prized for their perceived medicinal properties, believed to ward off illness and boost stamina. You might grumble about the lingering breath, but you'll appreciate the rare bite of something with actual flavor. Beyond these common workhorses, the selection quickly dwindles. Leeks, turnips, and parsnips might occasionally supplement your meals, especially if your legion is stationed in an area where they are abundant. These root vegetables are hardy storewell and provide essential nutrients and fiber. Imagine the joy of finding a fresh turnip after weeks of dried provisions. It's a small, fleeting pleasure, but one you learn to savor. The concept of a balanced plate, as we understand it today, simply didn't exist for you. Vegetables were a complement, a minor addition to the caloric powerhouses of grain and legumes. They added some much-needed vitamins and minerals crucial for staving off scurvy and other deficiency diseases, but they were never the star of the show. You learn to eat what's available, and available often means what's easy to cultivate, or more likely what can be foraged from the local countryside. This brings us to a crucial point. The availability of fresh produce was highly dependent on your location and the season. If you're campaigning in the depths of winter, fresh vegetables become a distant memory, replaced by dried or pickled versions. This is where the ingenuity of the Roman supply system and often the necessity of individual foraging came into play. A particularly quirky tidbit is the Roman love for all charred mallow leaves. Often gathered wild and boiled, while perhaps not the most exciting green, it was readily available and provided a burst of vitamins. Historians still argue whether the long-term impact of such a limited vegetable diet significantly affected the health and stature of legionaries. While scurvy and other deficiency diseases were certainly a threat, the sheer volume of grain and occasional protein sources likely mitigated the worst effects. Still, you might find yourself longing for the taste of a fresh apple or the crispness of a lettuce leaf, a yearning that speaks to the deeper human desire for variety and simple pleasure in food. So, while your diet ensures you're fed, fueled, and functioning, don't expect a garden salad with your pulmentum. Your vegetable consumption is practical, utilitarian, and utterly devoid of frills. It's about providing the necessary roughage and nutrients to keep your body in fighting shape, not about pleasing your palate. Every bite of boiled cabbage or raw onion serves a purpose, reminding you that in the Legion, every morsel of food is a tool for survival. Now let's talk about momiti. Eat. If you've envisioned Roman legionaries feasting on roasted boars and succulent cuts of beef every night, you're about to have a rather rude awakening. For the common soldier, a meat was not a daily staple. It was a luxury often reserved for specific campaigns, special occasions, or when the legion was in a position to easily acquire it. Your primary protein sources, as you're well aware by now, come from grains and legumes, not from animal flesh. When meat was available, it was usually in the form of pork goat or mutton. Beef was less common due largely to the logistical challenges of rearing and transporting large cattle, especially on long marches. Plus, cattle were valuable for plowing and transport, making them a less expendable food source. Chickens, too, might be found, but often belonged to officers or were kept for eggs. You'd rarely see them on your plate unless it was a very special circumstance. So, when did you get meat? Think of it as a bonus, a reward. If your legion successfully foraged or plundered livestock from conquered territories, then and only then might you experience the rare pleasure of a meaty meal. This wasn't a sustainable supply chain, but rather opportunistic acquisition. You'd learn to recognize the scent of roasting meat wafting through the camp as a sign of recent success or perhaps an impending celebratory feast. Another scenario for meat consumption was during specific campaigns where hunting was viable and encouraged. If you were garrisoned near forests teeming with wild game, Some hunting parties might be dispatched. However, this was often dangerous and time-consuming, pulling valuable manpower away from other duties. It wasn't a standard provision. A particularly quirky tidbit related to this is the Roman practice of raising some dormus betanach in special pots called glieria, and fattening them for consumption by the wealthy, but rest assured this gourmet treat never made it to your legionary mess. The preparation of meat was like everything else practical. It was usually boiled or roasted. Over an open fire, spices were scarce for the common soldier, so the flavor would be largely natural, perhaps with some salt if you were lucky. You'd share the portions with your contubernium, ensuring everyone got a taste, even if it was just a small strip. You learn to savor every bite, knowing it might be weeks or months before you see such a luxury again. Historians still argue whether the perceived scarcity of meat for the rank and file was primarily due to logistical difficulties or a conscious dietary choice based on health or economic reasons. Some scholars suggest a vegetarian-leaning diet was considered healthier and more efficient for soldiers, while others point to the sheer challenge of feeding thousands of men meat daily on campaign. What's clear is that the image of a beef-gorging Roman soldier is largely a modern fantasy. So while you might dream of juicy steaks, your reality is far more grounded. Meat is a fleeting pleasure, a sign of good fortune or successful foraging. It's a powerful motivator, a tangible reward, but never the reliable backbone of your daily sustenance. Instead, you rely on the steady energy of grains and the quiet protein of legumes, making those rare, meaty meals all the more memorable. You appreciate the flavor, the texture, the simple satisfaction of a substantial bite of roasted animal, knowing full well it's an exception, not the rule. With meat being a rare guest at your mess tent, you quickly learn to appreciate the true workhorses of the legionary diet. Legumes. These aren't just an occasional side dish, they are a primary, dependable source of protein, fiber, and essential nutrients, forming a crucial counterbalance to the endless grains. Think of them as the unsung heroes of your digestive system, quietly bolstering your strength and endurance. Your most common companions in the legume family are lentils and chickpeas. These are hardy crops, relatively easy to grow, and crucially simple to store and transport in their dried form. They don't spoil easily, making them ideal for the constantly moving, logistically challenging life of a Roman army. You'll see them arrive in large sacks, sometimes whole, sometimes already split, ready to be added to your pulmentum, or boiled into a hearty, if uninspired stew of their own. You might experience them most often as a thick, somewhat mushy addition to your morning gruel, transforming the simple grain-based dish into something far more substantial. The added protein makes a noticeable difference, helping to keep you feeling full for longer and providing the building blocks for muscle repair after a strenuous day of drilling or marching. You might grumble about the repetition, but your body silently thanks you for the sustained energy. Beyond lentils and chickpeas, you might occasionally encounter saptos, broad beans, fava beans, or chucked peas, especially if your legion is operating in an area where these are cultivated. Like their cousins, they are dried for preservation, then rehydrated and cooked. The process is simple. Soak them overnight, boil them until tender, and then consume. There's no elaborate seasoning, no delicate sautéing. It's all about getting those vital nutrients into your system with maximum efficiency and minimum fuss. The nutritional significance of legumes cannot be overstated. In a diet that often lacked consistent access to animal protein, these plant-based powerhouses filled a critical gap. They provided the spanpine amino acids necessary for muscle development and repair the hot fiber flora. To keep your digestive system functioning, a non-trivial concern when your diet is so consistently dense and a host of vitamins and minerals that helped ward off illnesses. Historians still argue about the precise impact of legume consumption on the average Roman soldier's long-term health and physical resilience compared to other ancient armies. What is clear is that the Romans understood their value, even if they didn't have a modern nutritional chart to explain why. A particularly quirky tidbit is the Roman fascination with oscat chickpeas me. Cicer in Latin, which were so common and beloved that the famous Roman orator Cicero actually got his surname from his family's association with them, or perhaps a prominent wart on his nose that resembled a chickpea. You might not find them quite as charming as Cicero did, especially after eating them for the 100th time, but you'll certainly recognize their vital role. So while your dreams of roasted meat remain largely unfulfilled, you quickly come to terms with the steady, reliable presence of legumes. They are the backbone of your non-grain nutrition, the quiet workhorses that ensure your body receives the necessary protein and fiber to perform under demanding conditions. You might not sing odes to a bowl of boiled lentils, but you instinctively understand their importance in keeping you strong, healthy, and ready for whatever the Legion throws at you next. While the bulk of your legionary diet arrives in sacks of grain and dried legumes, there's another more unpredictable but often welcome source of sustenance: foraging. You quickly learn that relying solely on the quartermaster's provisions while consistent leaves little room for variety, or even, dare I say, delight. When the Legion is on the march or stationed in a relatively safe fertile area, foraging parties are often dispatched, and you might find yourself among them. This isn't a stroll through a farmer's market. It's a strategic operation balancing the need for food with the ever-present danger of encountering hostile locals or unexpected ambushes. Your centurion will assign you to a group armed, of course, and with clear instructions, bring back anything edible and crucially identifiable. You're looking for wild greens, berries, mushrooms, only the ones you're absolutely certain about. Of course, no one wants a poisoned contubernum, and sometimes even small game. The thrill of discovery is real. Imagine stumbling upon a patch of wild asparagus or a cluster of sweet mouse mulberries. These finds, while small, represent a momentary escape from the relentless monotony of pulmentum and hardtack. You learn which plants are edible and which are not, often through observation of the locals or the hard-won wisdom of older legionaries. This practical botanical knowledge becomes as vital as knowing how to properly wield your gladius. Foraging isn't just about finding food, it's also about supplementing your diet with crucial vitamins and minerals that might be scarce in your standard rations. Fresh greens provide vitamin C, helping to ward off scurvy, which was a constant threat on long campaigns with limited fresh produce. Berries offer a burst of natural sugars and antioxidants. It's a vital, if risky, way to diversify your intake. Sometimes, if you're lucky and the area is rich, you might even manage to catch some small game, a rabbit perhaps, or a few birds with snares or basic traps. This is where the thrill of meat truly comes in, far more satisfying than a meager ration handed out by the supply officer. You'll carefully clean and cook your find over a small fire, the aroma a stark contrast to the usual camp smells. A particularly quirky tidbit is the historical evidence suggesting that legionaries often kept hunting dogs, specifically for this purpose, sharing their sparse rations with them in anticipation of a successful hunt. However, foraging comes with its own set of dangers. You're outside the protective walls of the camp or the marching column, exposed and vulnerable. You could encounter hostile forces, dangerous wildlife, or simply get lost. And of course, there's always the risk of misidentifying a plant, turning a hopeful meal into a stomach-churning regret. Historians still debate the extent to which foraging contributed to the overall caloric intake of a legion. Some argue it was a negligible supplement, while others suggest it played a crucial role in maintaining morale and preventing widespread deficiencies, especially in prolonged campaigns. You learn to be efficient, quick, and always aware of your surroundings. Every successful foraging trip feels like a small victory, a temporary lifting of the dietary curse. It reminds you that even within the strict confines of military life, there are still ways to find a touch of wild freedom and a little bit of flavor in a world dominated by bland necessity. After a grueling day of marching under a relentless sun or shivering through a damp, cold night, there's one comfort that often awaits you. Wine. But don't imagine goblets of fine aged vintages. The wine you receive as a Roman legionary is like much of your diet functional and often quite humble. It's typically a sour, unrefined red wine, often mixed with water to make it more palatable, less intoxicating, and to stretch the supply. This diluted concoction is known as Posca, and it's far more than just a drink. It's a vital part of your daily hydration and a rudimentary health aid. You'll quickly get used to the taste, a sharp, acidic tang that cuts through the dust and grime of camp life. The primary reason for diluting the wine with water wasn't just to prevent drunkenness, though that was certainly a benefit for discipline. It was also a way to purify questionable water sources. The alcohol, even in small amounts, and the acidity of the wine helped to kill bacteria, making potentially unsafe water much safer to drink. In an era before modern sanitation, this was a surprisingly effective public health measure, preventing countless cases of dysentery and other waterborne illnesses that could decimate a legion far more effectively than any enemy. Posca was therefore a triple threat. It was a thirst quencher, a mild disinfectant, and a hod, source of calories and electrolytes. From the grapes, you'd carry it in your legina, a personal flask, sipping from it throughout the day, especially on marches. It was a constant companion, offering a little bit of flavor in a largely flavorless world, and a sense of refreshment that plain water often couldn't provide. The quality and type of wine would vary wildly depending on your location. If you were stationed in a fertile wine-producing region like Gaul or Italy, your Posca might be slightly more palatable. If you were on the fringes of the empire in Britannia or along the Germanic frontier, it might be harsher, made from wilder grapes or even mixed with other fermented concoctions. Historians still argue about the precise alcohol content of Posca, with estimates ranging from barely alcoholic to slightly stronger depending on the dilution and the base wine. What is certain is that it was designed to hydrate and sustain, not to inebriate. A particularly quirky tidbit is the historical anecdote that Pontius Pilate, the Roman prefect, was offered Posca by a soldier during the crucifixion, indicating its widespread presence and commonality even among non-military populations. It truly was the drink of the common man, and especially the common soldier. Beyond Posca, undiluted wine was reserved for special occasions or officers. You might see your centurion or a tribune sipping from a purer vintage, a clear sign of their higher status. For you, the legionary, it's the acidic, watery Posca that defines your drinking experience. It's not a luxurious indulgence. It's a practical, essential part of your daily ration, keeping you hydrated and hopefully free from stomach ailments. You learn to appreciate its simple effectiveness, even if you dream of something a little smoother, a little sweeter, to ease the weary hours. As vital as wine, or rather Posca, was for your daily hydration and gut health, the absolute foundation of your survival. The single most critical element you constantly sought, guarded, and sometimes fought for was piqué, water. Forget your food rations for a moment. Without water, you wouldn't last more than a few days, especially not under the relentless sun of a summer campaign or the arduous exertion of a forced march. The availability and purity of water were a perpetual concern for every legionary, and indeed for the entire Roman military machine. You quickly learn that not all water is created equal. A stagnant pool, a murky river, or a questionable well could mean the swift end of a career, or worse your life, as diseases like dysentery ran rampant through legions. Your training emphasizes the importance of sourcing clean water. This meant seeking out fresh springs, fast-flowing rivers upstream from settlements, or ideally relying on the marvels of Roman engineering: aqueducts. If your legion was garrisoned near a city or a large fort, you might have the luxury of piped, relatively clean water. This was a true blessing, a testament to Roman ingenuity and its direct impact on military health. On campaign, however, the situation was far more precarious. You'd often rely on your own wits and the guidance of experienced scouts to find potable water. Digging shallow wells. In seemingly dry riverbeds was a common technique, hoping to hit the water table. The process was arduous, but the reward, a fresh, if sometimes silty drink, was worth every shovel of earth. You'd fill your water skin, often made of goat or sheep, hide as often as possible, knowing that every drop was precious. But simply finding water wasn't enough. You also had to ensure its safety. This is where your trusty pasca came in handy, as the wine's acidity and alcohol content offered a rudimentary form of purification. However, for larger quantities of water, or when wine was scarce, other methods were employed. The most common was boiling. You might spend precious moments gathering firewood and heating water, not for cooking, but simply to make it safe to drink. The taste of boiled water might be flat, but the peace of mind it offered was invaluable. Historians still argue about the widespread adoption and effectiveness of these battlefield purification methods, with some suggesting that waterborne illnesses remained a significant cause of mortality. Another technique particularly relevant to a quirky tidbit involved using natural filters. While not a standard practice, there are mentions of Roman soldiers sometimes using layers of sand, gravel, and charcoal in makeshift pits to filter water. This demonstrates a surprising, if rudimentary, understanding of water purification principles. Imagine constructing a little filtration system before you even pitched your tent. You learn to be vigilant. You learn to conserve. You learn that a full water skin is more valuable than gold. The daily struggle for clean water underlines the harsh realities of ancient warfare, where something as fundamental as thirst could cripple an army as effectively as any enemy blade. Every sip you take, every refill of your water skin, is a silent acknowledgement of this constant life or death pursuit. The concept of a leisurely meal where you sit, relax, and savor each bite is largely alien to your life as a Roman legionary, especially when on the move. Most of your days involve marching, often for hours on end, under the relentless sun or through driving rain. And during these marches, your diet adapts to the exigencies of movement. This is where the ponchikatni, marching ration factor, comes into its own, emphasizing portability, durability, and immediate energy. Your marching ration is a testament to practicality. Forget hot meals or elaborate preparations. What you carry is what you eat. This primarily consists of your trusty shki hard bread, often called buccellatum, a twice-baked, extremely dry biscuit designed for maximum shelf life and minimal spoilage. You'll find yourself gnawing on a piece as you trudge along its hard texture, providing a slow release of carbohydrates. It's not delicious, but it's effective, providing the necessary calories without requiring a halt for cooking. Alongside the bread, you'll carry a pouch of dried grains or legumes. Perhaps some toasted wheat kernels, far, or triticum, or a handful of dried chickpeas. These can be eaten raw, simply chewed, providing a quick burst of energy and some much-needed protein. The sound of 1,000 legionaries simultaneously gnawing on hard biscuits and dry grains creates a strange, constant hum on the march, a testament to the collective effort of simply staying fueled. Your water skin filled with pond pasca. That diluted wine we discussed is perhaps the most crucial part of your marching kit. You'll sip from it frequently, especially during the hotter parts of the day, to stay hydrated and ward off the debilitating effects of dehydration. The acidic tang of the pasca, sha, becomes as familiar as the rhythm of your own footsteps. You learn to conserve every drop, knowing that the next water source might be miles away. The challenges of consuming these rations on the march are numerous. You're often eating while walking, jostled by the men around you, your eyes scanning the horizon for potential threats. There's no time for proper mastication. It's about quickly getting calories into your system. You might feel the grit of dust on your teeth or the sting of a sudden downpour mixing with your mouthful of dry bread. Eating on the march is a utilitarian act stripped of all pleasure. A particularly quirky tidbit related to marching rations is the Roman practice of sometimes carrying smoked or salted meat. But this was exceptionally rare for the common soldier and usually reserved for specialist units or short rapid expeditions where weight was less of a concern. For you, it's mostly plant-based fuel that powers your journey. Historians still argue about the exact weight of a legionary's Sarsenus marching pack, with some estimates reaching over 60 pounds, a significant portion of which would be taken up by food rations. The efficiency of this system is undeniable. It allows the Legion to maintain a relentless pace, covering vast distances without the need for frequent time-consuming halts for cooking. You become a self-sufficient unit, a walking engine fueled by simple, durable provisions. Every bite you take, every sip of pasca, is a testament to your endurance and the unforgiving practicality of Roman military logistics. You learn to appreciate the simplicity, even as you long for a hot meal and a moment of rest. While marching rations sustain you on the move, there comes a moment of respite, usually at the end of a long day, when the Legion establishes its campechop. And within the temporary safety of the ramparts and ditches, the focus shifts to preparing a more substantial, albeit still simple, meal. Cooking in camp is a communal affair, a practical necessity that binds your 8-man contubernium together. You might be tired, your muscles aching from the day's exertions, but the work isn't over until the evening meal is prepared. Each contubernium is a self-contained unit, and that includes managing its own cooking. There are no large centralized mess halls for the common soldier. Instead, small cooking fires are lit within designated areas of the camp, often within individual tent spaces or shared pits. The air soon fills with the scent of wood smoke, mingling with the earthy aroma of boiling grains and the occasional tantalizing but rare whiff of roasting meat. The methods are as straightforward as the ingredients. Your primary cooking vessel is likely a pointy, metal cauldron or potmiki, robust enough to withstand the rigors of campaign life. This is where your pulmentum will be simmered, where dried legumes will be rehydrated and boiled, and where any scavenged vegetables will be softened. You take turns with your tent mates, one man gathering firewood, another drawing water, and another tending the fire and stirring the pot. It's a rhythmic, almost meditative process, the simple act of preparing food, a small anchor in the chaos of military life. You quickly learn about resourcefulness. If fresh ingredients are scarce, you adapt. You might soak dried vegetables or grains for longer, or add a handful of wild herbs if someone in your contubernium has a knack for foraging. Salt, if available, is used sparingly, a precious commodity that enhances flavor and aids in preservation. A particularly quirky tidbit is that Roman soldiers often carried small personal griddles or baking plates to make flatbreads directly over their campfires, showcasing their self-reliance. The shared meal is one of the few moments of genuine camaraderie. You gather around the fire, hunched against the evening chill, passing around bowls of steaming gruel or chunks of dense bread. It's a time for quiet conversation, for recounting the day's events, or simply for enjoying the warmth and the temporary respite. Historians still argue about the exact division of labor within a contubernium, when it came to cooking and chores, with some suggesting a rotation system, while others point to specialized roles emerging based on individual skills. What is certain is that every man had a part to play. Even the process of cleaning up Niyor is efficient and simple. The pots are scoured with sand and water, the eating utensils often just simple wooden or metal spoons wiped clean. There's no elaborate dishwashing. Everything is about practicality and preparation for the next day's duties, which will inevitably begin long before dawn. So while cooking in camp might lack the sophistication of a Roman villa kitchen, it provides the essential fuel to keep the legion functioning. It's a communal ritual, a moment of shared labor and sustenance that reinforces the bonds between you and your tent mates, transforming basic ingredients into the energy required for survival and conquest. You've grown accustomed to the dominant flavors of your legionary diet, the earthy notes of pulmentum, the hearty density of bread, the occasional tang of paskabak. But there's one ubiquitous ingredient that provides a surprising, intense burst of flavor, a condiment that was as essential to the Roman palate as salt is to ours garum. Imagine a pungent, salty, and distinctly umami-rich liquid derived from fermented fish. That's garum. It might sound unappetizing to modern ears, perhaps even a bit revolting, but for the Romans it was a culinary cornerstone, used in virtually every dish from the simplest gruel to the most elaborate banquets. And yes, it absolutely made its way into the legionaries' mess. You would encounter garum in various forms. Sometimes it would be a thin, clear liquid, sometimes thicker and cloudier, depending on the grade and origin. It was produced by crushing whole small fish or parts of larger fish, mixing them with a large quantity of salt, and then allowing the mixture to ferment in the sun for weeks or even months. The resulting liquid was then strained, leaving behind a clear amber-colored sauce. The smell during production was notoriously intense, to put it mildly, but the final product was highly prized. For you, the common legionary garum was likely a godsend. Your bland diet, devoid of complex spices or fresh herbs, desperately needed a flavor enhancer. A dash of garum transformed a bowl of plain pulmentum from merely edible to something approaching, dare I say, palatable. It added a salty depth and savory richness that awakened your taste buds. It might have even been mixed into your pasca on occasion, or drizzled over hard bread to soften it and add flavor. The ubiquitous nature of garum meant that it was produced on an industrial scale throughout the Roman Empire, with major centers of production in places like Spain and North Africa. It was transported in distinctive amphorae, becoming a common sight in military camps. Historians still argue about the precise nutritional benefits of garum. While it certainly provided salt and some amino acids, its primary role was undoubtedly culinary. Some scholars suggest it may have also provided trace minerals, a theory that continues to be debated. A particularly quirky tidbit is that different grades of garum existed, from the highly prized garum sociorum from certain types of mackerel enjoyed by the elite to the more common, cheaper varieties that would have found their way to your mess. Imagine even your fish sauce had a social hierarchy. So while the idea of fermented fish sauce might initially make you recoil, you quickly learn to appreciate garum for what it is, a vital tool in the legionaries' culinary arsenal. It's the closest thing you have to a secret ingredient, a small splash of intense flavor that makes the endless repetition of your diet just a little bit more bearable. You might not crave it when you're off duty, but when you're deep in the field, a bottle of garum is a true friend to your taste buds. Beyond the staple grains, legumes, and the potent punch of garum, there's another liquid gold that holds a revered place in your Roman diet. Olive oil. It's not merely a cooking fat, it's a versatile commodity, deeply ingrained in Roman culture, used for everything from food preparation to personal hygiene, and it plays a significant role in your nutritional intake. You'll encounter olive oil in various ways. Sometimes it's drizzled over your pulmentum, or added to stews not just for flavor, but to add crucial to calories and healthy fats, to a predominantly carbohydrate-based diet. It provides a richness, a smoothness that your simple meals otherwise lack. Imagine a spoonful of thick gruel suddenly transformed by a slick of fragrant olive oil. It's a subtle but significant upgrade, a moment of fleeting culinary luxury. Beyond its direct consumption, olive oil is essential for basort cooking. When you manage to acquire vegetables or on those rare occasions, a piece of meat, olive oil is likely the fat used for frying or sautéing. It imparts its distinctive fruity, peppery notes to anything it touches, elevating the basic flavors of camp food. You learn to appreciate its subtle complexity, a stark contrast to the bluntness of most of your rations. But the uses of olive oil extend far beyond the mess tent. You'll also use it for personal hygiene. After a dusty day of training or marching, you might rub a small amount of oil onto your skin before scraping it off with a strigil, a curved metal scraper, to remove dirt, sweat, and dead skin. This ancient form of cleansing, while perhaps unfamiliar to modern sensibilities, was a common practice and speaks to the oil's multifaceted utility. Historians still argue about the exact proportion of olive oil allocated for dietary versus hygienic purposes for the common legionary. Some scholars suggest a significant portion was for external use, highlighting its dual function. The source of this vital commodity varies. Large quantities of olive oil were produced throughout the Roman Empire, particularly in regions like Spain, North Africa, and of course Italy. It was transported in large amphorae, becoming a common sight in the supply convoys that snaked their way to legions across the vast Roman territory. Its constant presence underscores its strategic importance, almost as critical as grain itself. A particularly quirky tidbit is the Roman fascination with different grades of olive oil. While you, the legionary, would likely receive a more utilitarian common grade, the elite enjoyed oils pressed from the first harvest or those infused with herbs and spices. But even your basic ration was a precious commodity, a testament to the empire's agricultural might and logistical reach. So when you see those familiar amphorae arriving in camp, you recognize not just a foodstuff, but a cornerstone of Roman life, both military and civilian. Olive oil is a silent workhorse, providing essential energy and nutrients while also serving as a simple yet effective tool for cleanliness. It's a reminder that even in the harsh realities of legionary life, there are elements of everyday Roman culture that transcend the battlefield. You've heard it said that salt is worth its weight in gold, and as a Roman legionary, you quickly understand why. Salt mawatipli isn't just a seasoning for your notoriously bland food, it's a porquois crucial commodity for survival. Essential for both human health and perhaps even more importantly in the context of the legion for food preservation. Without salt, the logistical challenges of feeding a vast army on campaign would have been insurmountable. Think about the sheer volume of food needed to sustain thousands of men day after day, week after week. Perishable items like meat and some vegetables simply wouldn't last the journey from their source to your remote outpost or rapidly moving column without some form of preservation. This is where salt steps in. Salting meat and fish was one of the most effective ways to prevent spoilage, drawing out moisture and inhibiting bacterial growth. You might occasionally receive rations of salted pork or dried salted fish. Tough and intensely briny, but undeniably preserved. It's not a delicacy, but it's food that won't go rotten on the march, and that alone makes it invaluable. Beyond preservation, salt is vital for your own body. As a soldier, you're constantly sweating, losing essential B electrolytes. The physical exertion of marching, digging, and drilling, especially in hot climates, depletes your body's salt reserves. Without adequate salt intake, you'd quickly suffer from cramps fatigue and eventually severe dehydration and collapse. Your body craves that salty taste, an instinctive response to a physiological need. Adding salt to your pulmentum or your meager vegetables isn't just about flavor. It's about staying alive and functional. The Romans had a sophisticated understanding of salt production and trade. Salt was extracted from salt pans along coastlines through evaporation of seawater or mined from inland salt deposits. Major salt roads like the famous Via Salaria salt road leading to Rome attest to its immense economic and strategic importance. So valuable was it that soldiers were sometimes paid in part with salt, giving rise to the word salary from the Latin salarium, meaning salt money. Historians still argue whether this direct payment in salt was a regular practice or a more symbolic gesture of its value. A particularly quirky tidbit is the Roman use of salt as a purifying agent, in religious rituals reflecting its perceived purity and essential nature beyond mere sustenance. You might not participate in such rituals, but the reverence for salt permeates the very air you breathe and certainly the food you eat. You quickly learn to treasure your salt ration. It's a small white crystal, unassuming in appearance, but possessing immense power. It makes your otherwise bland food tolerable, keeps you hydrated, and most crucially, allows the legion's vast supply chain to function. Every pinch you add to your meal is a reminder of the fundamental elements that keep the mighty Roman war machine grinding forward. While the standard Roman legionary diet was built on the unshakable trinity of grain legumes and the ever-present garum, you quickly learn that true culinary variety, however fleeting, often comes from local lore and grub. As your legion campaigns across diverse landscapes, from the vineyards of Gaul to the wild forests of Germania or the arid plains of Egypt, the diet subtly shifts, influenced by whatever can be acquired from the immediate environment or the people living within it. This means you're constantly adapting. If your legion is pushing through a forested region, you might find an increased reliance on wild game, if hunting parties prove successful. If you're garrisoned near a coastal area, the occasional fresh fish might grace your plate, a welcome change from dried or salted varieties. Imagine the sheer delight of a freshly caught, simply grilled fish after weeks of preserved rations. It's a taste of the sea, a reminder of a world beyond the confines of camp. Interaction with such local populations also plays a significant role. While the Romans were certainly conquerors, they were also pragmatic. Sometimes provisions would be requisitioned or purchased from local farmers and markets. This could introduce entirely new foodstuffs to your diet. Perhaps you'd encounter a local variety of cheese or unfamiliar fruits like dates in the Near East, or specific types of berries and nuts in colder northern climes. These aren't consistent, reliable additions, but rather delightful, unexpected bonuses. You might be wary at first, but hunger and the promise of something different usually win out. A particularly quirky tidbit is the Roman habit of incorporating local produce into their rations, sometimes even cultivating Roman crops alongside native ones in newly established camps or forts. For example, in Britannia, archaeological digs at Roman sites have uncovered evidence of Mediterranean plants being grown alongside native British species, indicating an attempt to both adapt and introduce Roman dietary norms. This shows a long-term vision even for seemingly temporary outposts. This blending of standard rations with local fare often leads to improvisation in the mess. A basic porridge, pulmentum or might suddenly be enlivened by a handful of local wild herbs you wouldn't find back in Italy. Or a particularly successful foraging mission might yield a bounty of mushrooms, leading to a rare savory addition to your evening meal. Historians still argue about the extent to which these local variations significantly impacted the overall nutritional status of the legions, or if they were merely superficial changes to an otherwise rigid diet. What is clear is that these fleeting moments of localized flavor were crucial for morale. You become more attuned to your surroundings, learning to identify edible plants and local animal tracks, not just for survival in a hostile environment, but for the sheer possibility of adding a touch of variety to your bowl. These small deviations from the norm are precious a reminder that even in the strict uniformity of the Legion, there are still whispers of the diverse world you are helping to conquer. Every new taste tells a story of the land you're occupying and the people who call it home. Life in the Legion, while demanding, also had its inevitable periods of vulnerability. Even the most robust soldier could fall ill or be wounded in battle. And when that happens, your diet undergoes a subtle but significant shift. In the sick bay, or valetudinarium, as it was known in larger forts, the focus moves from brute calories for exertion to sustenance designed for healing and recovery. You're no longer expected to choke down dense pulmentum or gnaw on hardtack. The food provided in the sick bay is typically lighter, more easily digestible, and aimed at nourishing a weakened body without taxing its already strained systems. Think meal, broths, and thin porridges, often made from more refined grains, or sometimes even a little honey for energy. The emphasis is on gentle sustenance, not bulk. If you've suffered a fever, a wound, or simply succumbed to one of the common camp illnesses, your diet might consist of barley water, a soothing, easily digestible drink made from boiled barley, or a thin gruel thinned with more water than usual. Fresh, soft foods, if available, would be prioritized. This could mean a rare treat of stewed fruit, or a softer, less fibrous bread designed to be consumed with minimal effort. The availability of these specialized foods depended heavily on the resources of the individual, valetudinarium, and the supply lines. Larger, more permanent forts would have dedicated stores for the sick, perhaps even keeping a small number of chickens for eggs or very light meat broth. On campaign, however, the options would be far more limited, relying on what could be adapted from standard rations. A particularly quirky tidbit is the Roman use of shazbi fenugreek as a medicinal food often incorporated into broths for its purported healing properties and pleasant aroma, especially for those recovering from illness. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of Roman military medicine and, by extension, its dietary provisions for the sick. While their understanding of germ theory was non-existent, the practical approach of providing easily digestible, nutrient-rich, or at least calorie-rich foods likely aided recovery significantly. The very act of providing special food for the sick demonstrates a pragmatic understanding of the link between nutrition and healing, even if the scientific basis was unknown. You would notice the stark difference in presentation, too. Instead of a communal ladle from a large pot, your food might be brought to you individually, perhaps in a smaller, cleaner bowl. The pace of consumption is slower, more deliberate, as your body conserves energy for healing. It's a stark reminder that even within the rigid structure of the Legion, there was a system, however rudimentary, to care for those who couldn't care for themselves. So while your usual diet is about powering a war machine, the sick bay offers a brief glimpse into a more compassionate, if still intensely practical approach to food. It's about restoring strength, easing digestion, and providing comfort to a body in distress, all with the ultimate goal of getting you back on your feet and back to your duties as quickly as possible. Every spoonful of broth is a step on the road to recovery, a quiet assurance that even when you're at your weakest, the Legion still provides. You've heard stories, of course, about the staggering wealth of Rome, the opulent villas, the banquets overflowing with exotic delicacies. But for you, a common legionary, such extravagance is a distant dream. Your daily sustenance is provided by the Legion, a strict and often monotonous ration. However, there is a glimmer of opportunity to supplement this diet to acquire something beyond the standard fare. Your pay. Your pay, or a stipendium, isn't handed out daily or even weekly. It's typically dispersed in lump sums perhaps 3 times a year, while a significant portion of it is often deducted for equipment, clothing, and even burial funds, a cheerful thought that a small amount is indeed yours to spend. And what do you spend it on? Very often it's food, but not just any food. When your legion is stationed in a more permanent fort or encamped near a town, you might have access to local markets or traders who follow the army. This is your chance to break the monotony. You might splurge on something that feels truly luxurious after weeks of gruel, perhaps some fresh fruit. Figs, grapes, apples, depending on the season and region, a piece of cheese, or even if you're feeling particularly flush, a small portion of undiluted wine, for a genuine, albeit brief moment of indulgence. These purchases aren't about caloric intake, they're about morale and variety. Imagine the sheer psychological boost of biting into a crisp apple, its sweetness a stark contrast to the blandness of your everyday rations. Or the rich, tangy taste of a hard cheese, something far removed from the fermented fish sauce you've grown accustomed to. These are small luxuries, but deeply appreciated ones. A particularly quirky tidbit is the anecdotal evidence that some legionaries, particularly those from more affluent backgrounds, might even pool their pay to purchase a small animal like a chicken or a piglet from local farmers, raising it themselves in the camp for a future feast. Talk about a long-term culinary investment. The availability of such luxury items, of course, depends entirely on your current posting. Deep in barbarian territory or on a rapid forced march, such opportunities would be non-existent. But when your legion settles for a time, even a few copper asses in your pocket can feel like immense wealth. Historians still argue about the precise purchasing power of a legionary's stipendium and how much discretionary income truly remained after deductions. Some scholars suggest it was barely enough for essentials, while others contend there was indeed room for small personal indulgences. You might also use your pay to acquire simple seasonings, like better quality salt, or perhaps a small pouch of dried herbs from a local vendor, further personalizing your otherwise standardized meals. These small acts of culinary rebellion, of taking control of a tiny sliver of your diet, become significant. So, while the Legion feeds you, your pay allows you to feed your soul, even if just a little. It's a brief escape from the rigid discipline of military life, a fleeting taste of personal choice in a world of mandates. Every coin spent on a fresh fig or a piece of good bread is an investment in your own small slice of comfort, a reminder that even a Roman legionary deserves a treat now and then. You've seen the wagons, heard the distant creak of axles, and smelled the mingled scents of grain and dried provisions. But have you ever considered the sheer scale of what it takes to feed a Roman legion beyond your individual mess tin? There's a vast, intricate system at play. Step inside your imagination for a moment and consider the Yaf Fort's larder, the colossal storage facilities that were the beating heart of Roman military logistics. These aren't just glorified pantries. Roman forts, especially the larger, more permanent ones, were designed with impressive granaries, shauhereia, robust stone or timber structures built to protect vast quantities of foodstuffs from damp pests and theft. Imagine enormous halls, sometimes raised off the ground on stone pillars, to allow for air circulation and prevent moisture damage with thick walls and secure doors. Inside, you'd find towering stacks of sacks, each brimming with wheat barley and dried legumes. The air would be dry and cool, filled with the earthy scent of stored grain. Beyond the dry goods, there would be dedicated storage for other essentials. Large amphorae. Those distinctive terracotta jars would be lined up in rows filled with olive oil, garum, and wine. The sheer number of these vessels would be staggering, each one representing a shipment from distant provinces. You might also find barrels of salted meat or fish kept in cooler, darker areas, their pungent aroma a testament to their preservation. Historians still argue about the precise capacity of horia in various Roman forts, with some estimates suggesting they could hold enough grain to feed a legion for several months, highlighting the incredible foresight and planning involved. The management of this larder was a complex logistical challenge requiring meticulous record-keeping and a constant awareness of consumption rates versus incoming supplies. Every sack of grain, every amphora of oil was accounted for. The quartermasters, usually experienced legionaries or specialists, were responsible for this immense undertaking, ensuring that the soldiers under their command were consistently fed. This wasn't merely about sustenance, it was about strategic readiness. A legion couldn't fight if it was hungry. A particularly quirky tidbit found in archaeological digs are the remnants of bombe, carbonized grains, sometimes indicating that granaries caught fire. While tragic at the time, these carbonized remains have provided invaluable information to modern historians about the types of grains stored and consumed by Roman legions, offering a direct glimpse into their ancient diet. The fort's larder wasn't just a place of storage, it was a symbol of Roman power and organizational prowess. It represented the empire's ability to provision its armies far from home, sustaining vast numbers of men in often hostile territories. You, the legionary, might only see your daily ration, but understanding the monumental effort behind it gives you a deeper appreciation for the machine you are a part of. It's a silent, constant hum of logistical brilliance, ensuring that tomorrow and the day after that, your pulmentum will be ready. The existence of those vast granaries and rows of amphorae in the fort's larder hints at something even larger, a monumental undertaking that underpins your very survival as a Roman legionary, the incredibly complex system Dres. Behind the supply lines. Chaknaid. You're just one mouth to feed, but multiply that by thousands of men across hundreds of miles, and you begin to grasp the sheer logistical genius required to keep the Roman war machine running. Imagine the journey of your daily bread. It doesn't just appear, it starts as grain cultivated in the fertile fields of Gaul, Egypt, or Italy. This means extensive agricultural production, managed by Roman administrators or through requisitions from conquered peoples. This grain then needs to be harvested, threshed, and bagged, often by local laborers, sometimes under the watchful eye of Roman overseers. Once bagged, the real journey begins. The sacks are loaded onto takki, ox carts, mules, or river barges, depending on the terrain. Picture long, winding columns of wagons stretching for miles, groaning under their heavy loads, escorted by detachments of soldiers to protect against bandits or enemy raids. Rivers were vital arteries for transport, allowing for the movement of much larger quantities of goods than could be managed by land. If a river wasn't available, then legions had to build roads, bridges, and even canals, a testament to how integral supply was to their entire operation. At various points along the route, staging posts and smaller depots would be established where supplies could be unloaded, temporarily stored, and then reloaded onto fresh transport animals or different types of vessels. This continuous relay system ensured that the flow of provisions was maintained even over vast distances. Historians still argue about the precise efficiency of Roman supply lines, with some scholars emphasizing their remarkable effectiveness, while others highlight the constant challenges of loss, spoilage, and theft. Beyond grain, there's the procurement of other essentials: olive oil from Spain, garum from North Africa, wine from Italian vineyards. Each of these required specialized production, packaging, and transportation. Think of the thousands of terracotta amphorae carefully stacked on ships navigating the often treacherous waters of the Mediterranean, all bound for the various ports that supplied the frontier legions. A particularly quirky tidbit is the fact that legionaries themselves were often involved in logistical tasks such as building and maintaining roads and bridges for supply convoys, or even serving as drivers and guards. For the wagons, this wasn't just auxiliary work, it was a fundamental aspect of their military duties, blurring the lines between soldier and laborer, highlighting the self-sufficient nature of the Roman army. The sheer scale of this operation is mind-boggling. It speaks to a level of organization planning and infrastructure development that was unprecedented in the ancient world. Every bite of your pulmentum, every sip of your posca is a testament to thousands of miles traveled, countless hours of labor, and a constant logistical battle fought far from the front lines. The supply lines are the invisible veins of the empire, pumping life into its military heart, ensuring that you and your comrades are always ready to serve Rome. In the highly disciplined world of the Roman legion, every aspect of your life is regulated, and your food is no exception. This isn't a free-for-all. There are stringent dietary disciplines in place, not just to ensure fairness in distribution, but to maintain order, prevent waste, and crucially to reinforce the hierarchical structure of the army. You quickly learn that food isn't just sustenance, it's a tool of control. Your rations are precisely measured and distributed. There's no taking extra, no hoarding, and certainly no throwing away food. Any form of sekifwak, waste, or theft is considered a serious offense punishable by various means, from extra duties to more severe corporal punishments. You've seen men punished for trying to sneak an extra handful of grain or for carelessly spilling their pulmentum. It's a harsh lesson, but one that instills the value of every single calorie. This strict control extends to how food is prepared and consumed. While your contubernium might handle the cooking, there's an expectation of efficiency and adherence to basic standards. You're not meant to be gourmet chefs, but you are expected to ensure the food is edible and properly portioned. Your centurion or even a watchful veteran might make rounds to ensure these rules are being followed. Historians still argue about the precise level of oversight on individual contubernia food preparation, with some suggesting a degree of autonomy, while others emphasize the pervasive nature of military discipline. The disciplined approach to food also extends to foraging. While permitted, it's not a free-for-all. Foraging parties are typically organized, led by experienced soldiers, and have clear objectives and boundaries. Stealing from local populations or taking unapproved excursions would be met with severe punishment, as it could undermine Roman authority and cause unnecessary friction with the very people who might be relied upon for future supplies or intelligence. The rules were clear: procure what's needed, but do so lawfully and with discipline. The logic behind these stringent rules is multifaceted. Firstly, it ensures that every soldier, from the newest recruit to the most grizzled veteran, receives their fair share, minimizing resentment and internal strife. Secondly, it prevents waste in an environment where resources are often stretched thin. Every grain, every drop of oil represents a significant logistical effort. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, it reinforces discipline and obedience. By controlling something as fundamental as food, the Legion asserts its complete authority over your life. A particularly quirky tidbit is the anecdotal evidence that some Roman military camps had designated areas, almost like early mess halls, where soldiers would be expected to consume their meals further, reinforcing the communal and disciplined aspect of eating even when not on the march. It wasn't just about what you ate, but how and where you ate it. So as you dutifully consume your allocated ration, you're not just fueling your body, you're participating in a deeply ingrained system of military control. Every disciplined bite is a testament to the Legion's power over its men, a constant reminder that in this army, even your most basic needs are meticulously managed, ensuring that the collective strength of the Roman legions is never undermined by individual indiscipline or waste. While the bulk of your legionary life is defined by monotonous rations and strict dietary discipline, there are rare, glorious occasions when the rules relax and the spirit of shared celebration takes precedence. Feasts and festivals. These aren't daily occurrences or even weekly ones, but when they happen, they're a vivid, unforgettable contrast to your usual fare, a powerful boost to morale, and a reminder that even Roman soldiers sometimes got to party. These feasts would typically mark significant events, a major military victory, the successful conclusion of a long campaign, the emperor's birthday, or important religious festivals like the Saturnalia. Imagine the palpable excitement rippling through the camp as rumors of a coming feast spread. You'd see extra provisions arriving, perhaps more animals than usual, and the air would hum with anticipation. For these occasions, the rules about meat scarcity were temporarily suspended. You might actually see large cuts of roasted meat, perhaps even beef or wild boar bubbling in enormous cauldrons or roasting slowly over massive pits. The aroma alone would be intoxicating, a stark departure from the usual boiled grains. This wasn't just about filling your stomach. It was about the psychological impact of abundance, a sensory overload after so much scarcity. Beyond the meat, there would be other treats, perhaps real undiluted wine, flowing more freely than your usual Pasca paw. You might even get to taste some sweeter foods, like honeyed cakes, fresh fruits, if in season, or dried dates. These were precious indulgences, a taste of the civilian world's luxuries brought to the military camp. You'd find yourself savoring every bite, knowing how special this moment was. The atmosphere would be celebratory, a collective sigh of relief and camaraderie. Discipline wouldn't vanish entirely, of course. This was still the Roman army, but the strictness would loosen. Laughter would be louder songs, sung with more gusto, and the usual grimaces replaced by genuine smiles. These feasts served a crucial purpose: to bind the legion together, to reward their hard work, and to allow them a controlled release of pent-up energy and stress. Historians still argue about the frequency and scale of these feasts across different legions and periods, with some suggesting they were rarer than soldiers might have hoped, while others point to evidence of relatively frequent, if modest, celebrations. A particularly quirky tidbit is the Roman military's occasional use of triumphal arches and public banquets. In Rome itself, for victorious legions, where the soldiers would literally be wined and dined by the state, an ultimate form of public recognition and celebration that far outstripped anything seen in camp. You might dream of such a triumph, but for now, a good feast in camp is more than enough. So when the call for a feast goes out, you eagerly prepare. You might even contribute, sharing a specially acquired item or helping with the extra cooking. These aren't just meals, they are collective memories. Moments of joy and plenty that stand in stark contrast to the relentless routine. They are a powerful reminder that even amidst the rigors of military life, there is room for celebration, for shared revelry, and for the simple, profound pleasure of good food and companionship. You've seen the images, perhaps in a mosaic or a relief back home, a Roman soldier impossibly muscular, wrestling a wild boar, or sharing a platter piled high with roasted meats. It's a powerful, enduring image. But as you've learned through your own grumbling stomach, this feeds into the pervasive myth of the meaty Roman. The idea that Roman legionaries lived on a diet rich in animal protein. Your lived experience, however, paints a vastly different picture, one far more reliant on plant-based sustenance. The reality for the common legionary, as you now intimately know, is that your primary caloric intake comes from odd grains, predominantly wheat and barley. These are the workhorses, the fuel for your endless marches and grueling drills. Your protein comes largely from legumes. Chakna, the humble lentils, chickpeas, and broad beans that fill out your pulmentum hos and occasional stews. Meat, as we've discussed, is a rare treat, an opportunistic acquisition, or a reward for special occasions, never a daily staple. This discrepancy between popular perception and historical reality is a fascinating one. Why does the myth persist? Part of it likely stems from the diet of the Roman elite. Wealthy Romans with access to vast estates, professional hunters, and elaborate trade networks did indeed consume significant quantities of meat, including exotic game. Banquets were status symbols showcasing their power and ability to command resources. These images depicted in art and literature have often been extrapolated to represent the diet of all Romans, including the soldiers. But the social and economic chasm between a senator and a foot soldier was immense, and their diets reflected that. Another reason for the myth might be the romanticization of warfare. The image of a strong, victorious warrior often conjures thoughts of a protein-heavy, muscle-building diet. However, ancient sources and archaeological evidence consistently point to a diet that was primarily vegetarian, or at best, flexitarian, with very limited meat consumption for the vast majority of the population, including the military. Historians still argue about whether this largely plant-based diet made Roman soldiers more resilient than their meat-eating counterparts in some barbarian tribes, or if it simply made them more logistically sustainable over long campaigns. Think about the practicalities. Raising enough cattle or pigs to feed tens of thousands of soldiers daily and then transporting that perishable meat across the vast Roman Empire would have been an astronomical logistical nightmare. Grains and dried legumes, by contrast, are relatively easy to grow and bulk store for long periods and transport without spoiling. The Roman military was above all pragmatic and efficient, and a plant-based diet was simply more feasible on a grand scale. A particularly quirky tidbit is the historical emphasis on Roman soldiers being bread-eaters, panivores, a term that truly highlights the centrality of grain in their diet rather than meat-eaters, carnivores. This subtle linguistic distinction speaks volumes about the actual dietary reality. So as you chew on your tough bread and slurp your pulmentum, you become a living testament to the truth. The Roman legionary was a lean, hardy machine, fueled not by endless roasts, but by the steady, dependable power of the earth's bounty. You are the proof that immense strength and military might can be forged on a surprisingly bland, overwhelmingly vegetarian diet, a stark contrast to the meaty myth that often overshadows your true culinary history. Your journey through the Roman legionaries' diet has largely focused on the staples that remained consistent no matter where you were posted. However, the vastness of the Roman Empire meant that regional diet variations were an undeniable reality. While the core components of grain, legumes, and pasca remained, the availability of supplementary foods and sometimes even the type of grain could shift dramatically, depending on the legion's deployment and the local resources. Imagine being transferred from a comfortable garrison in Italy, where local farmers might occasionally trade fresh vegetables and fruits, to the harsh, cold frontier of Britannia. Suddenly, the availability of fresh produce might plummet, replaced by more dependence on preserved foods and whatever hardy root vegetables could be grown or foraged in a less forgiving climate. Your palate would notice the difference, perhaps longing for the crisp apples of home while chewing on boiled turnips. Conversely, a posting to Egypt or the fertile provinces of North Africa might introduce you to a greater abundance of certain foodstuffs. Date palms would provide sweet, energy-rich fruit. The prevalence of fishing in the Nile or along the Mediterranean coast could mean more frequent access to fresh fish, a welcome protein source. Even the type of grain might vary, with millet or emmer wheat being more common in some regions than the usual common wheat or barley. You'd quickly learn to identify the subtle distinctions in taste and texture. These variations weren't just about what was available, they also reflected the logistical challenges of different regions. Transporting goods over mountains or across vast deserts was far more difficult than shipping them across the Mediterranean. This meant that legions stationed in more remote or geographically challenging areas often had to rely more heavily on what could be produced or acquired locally, leading to a more localized diet. Historians still argue about the extent to which these regional dietary differences impacted the overall health and adaptation of legions to different climates. Some scholars suggest that a well-adapted local diet could significantly improve soldier well-being, while others point to the core Roman rations as sufficiently robust regardless of region. A particularly quirky tidbit comes from archaeological evidence found at Roman military sites on the frontier, where seeds and animal bones indicate that legions adapted to their local environments, sometimes consuming animals and plants not commonly found in Italy. For example, evidence from Hadrian's Wall suggests a greater reliance on wild game and local berries than might be typical in a Mediterranean posting. It's a clear sign of ingenuity and necessity. So while the central tenets of the legionary diet held firm, your culinary journey across the empire was far from uniform. Each new posting brought with it subtle, sometimes significant changes to your plate, forcing you to adapt your palate and appreciate the nuanced differences in what the vast Roman world could offer. It's a testament to the flexibility of the Roman military, capable of sustaining itself through immense geographical and environmental diversity, one meal at a time. In the brutal calculus of ancient warfare, food wasn't just sustenance. It was a potent weapon, a strategic tool used not only to maintain your own army, but also to devastate and control the enemy. You quickly learn that the success of a campaign isn't just about swords and shields. It's often about food as a weapon. Chuck, consider the strategy of a faum, siege. When your legion lays siege to an enemy city, cutting off their food supply is paramount. You'll see the circumvallation lines, the trenches, and the blockades that prevent any fresh provisions from reaching the besieged population. The goal isn't just to starve them into submission, though. That's certainly part of it. It's to weaken their morale, create internal strife, and make them too desperate to offer effective resistance. You might witness the slow, agonizing process as the enemy's food reserves dwindle, seeing their desperation grow with each passing day. The very act of eating your comparatively abundant, if bland, rations in full view of a starving enemy can be a psychological weapon in itself. Conversely, the Romans also used food to control conquered populations. By confiscating harvests, imposing tribute in grain, or disrupting local agricultural practices, Rome could exert immense power. This wasn't always about malice. It was often about ensuring the continuous supply for their own legions. However, it inevitably led to hardship for the defeated, forcing them into dependence on Roman authority. You might be part of the detachments tasked with overseeing the collection of grain or seizing livestock, a stark reminder of the economic realities of conquest. The destruction of enemy food sources was another common tactic. As your legion advanced through enemy territory, you might participate in scorched earth tactics. Burning fields, poisoning wells, though this was less common due to the risk of contaminating future Roman water sources or driving off livestock. This wasn't about malice, it was about denying the enemy resources, making it impossible for them to sustain a fighting force or a civilian population. It created a desolation that weakened their ability to resist long-term. Historians still argue about the moral implications of these destructive tactics, with some scholars highlighting their brutal effectiveness in breaking enemy will, while others condemn their civilian impact. A particularly quirky tidbit is the occasional Roman strategy of supplying food to rebellious factions within an enemy's territory, effectively using provisions as a bribe or a means to sow discord and weaken the enemy from within. It's a subtle, insidious use of food, far from its original purpose of nourishment. So as you continue your march or participate in a siege, you understand that the humble grain in your pack and the provisions of your supply lines are more than just sustenance. They are tools of empire wielded with strategic precision. Food in the hands of the Roman legion becomes a weapon of war capable of conquering foes, not just through direct combat, but through the slow, relentless pressure of hunger and deprivation. It's a harsh truth of ancient warfare, where the most basic human need can be turned into a potent instrument of victory. You've gained an intimate understanding of the Roman legionaries' diet, a world of pulmentum hard bread and rare meat. But it's important to remember that not everyone in the Roman military ate exactly the same. There was a significant difference between your humble rations and the more varied, even luxurious meals enjoyed by your officers. This distinction wasn't just about status, it reflected their higher pay access to personal slaves or servants and the wider network of trade that accompanied their rank. Imagine looking across the camp from your small shared tent to the larger, more comfortable quarters of your centurion, or perhaps even the elaborate praetorium of the legionary commander. While you're gnawing on your dry biscuit, they might be enjoying a far more diverse spread. Their higher pay allowed them to purchase additional foodstuffs from local markets or specialized traders who catered to the officers. This meant access to fresh produce, higher quality meats, and even imported delicacies that would never reach your mess. Officers often had slaves or personal cooks who could prepare meals with more sophistication. They weren't limited to communal cauldrons and open fires. Imagine the tantalizing scent of something truly roasted or even baked, prepared with actual herbs and spices wafting from an officer's tent. They might have personal supplies of finer afki wine, not just diluted posca, and perhaps even olive oil of a higher grade used for dressing salads or richer dishes. Historians still argue about the precise culinary gap between officers and common soldiers. Some scholars suggest it was vast, while others point out that even officers on campaign often had to make do with simpler fare than they were accustomed to at home. Their access to retail trade networks was also superior. As an officer, you might have merchants specifically approaching you with more exotic or perishable goods, knowing you have the means to pay for them. This could mean fresh fish from a nearby river, or even certain fruits that spoil quickly but are highly prized. A particularly quirky tidbit is the archaeological discovery of elaborate, finely crafted bronze and silver dining ware in officers' quarters, contrasting sharply with the simple wooden or earthenware bowls used by the common soldiers. Even their eating utensils spoke volumes about their rank. This dietary disparity, while perhaps frustrating to the common soldier, was generally accepted as part of the military hierarchy. Officers carried greater responsibility, faced different pressures, and their elevated status was reflected in their daily lives, including their meals. It was a tangible benefit of rank, a small comfort in a brutal profession. So while you might cast an envious glance at the aroma drifting from your centurion's tent, you understand the system. Your diet is about efficiency and sustenance for the mass, while theirs is about a small degree of comfort and status, a subtle reminder of the vast social and economic ladder that existed within the mighty Roman legions, stretching from the lowest recruit to the most powerful commander. You've heard stories of exotic marketplaces bustling with traders from across the empire, selling goods you could only dream of. While your primary source of sustenance is the legion's quartermaster and foraging offers sporadic variety, there are indeed instances where you, the common legionary, might find yourself beyond the camp's walls, interacting with civilian markets to enhance your culinary options. These moments are precious, offering a brief taste of civilian life and a chance to truly indulge your cravings. Imagine your legion is stationed for an extended period near a thriving Roman town, or perhaps even a newly pacified native settlement with a burgeoning market. On rare occasions, often on a designated rest day or during periods of relative peace, you might be granted leave to visit the local market. This isn't just about food, it's about freedom, even if temporary. Stepping into a bustling market after weeks or months of military rations is a sensory explosion. the vibrant colors of fresh produce, the cacophony of vendors hawking their wares, the enticing aromas of cooked foods. It's all a stark contrast to the rigid order of the camp. This is where your small accumulated pay, perhaps from several stipendium disbursements, comes into play. You can finally purchase items that are completely unavailable through military channels. What do you buy? Perhaps fresh bread. Still warm from a local baker's oven lighter and more flavorful than your camp-baked hardtack. You might eye juicy, seasonal fruits, like figs, grapes, or pomegranates, their sweetness a revelation after the blandness of dried provisions. Vegetables might be more plentiful and varied, offering a chance to taste something beyond cabbage and onions. A particularly quirky tidbit is the historical evidence that Roman soldiers, while often disciplined, were known to spend their money on local delicacies and even visit taverns, which often served simple prepared food alongside drinks, blurring the lines between military and civilian life. If you're truly lucky, you might even find small portions of gikao, cooked meat. From a street vendor, perhaps roasted chicken, or small skewers of seasoned lamb. These are rare treats enjoyed on the spot, savored for their richness and the sheer novelty. It's a fleeting moment of pure culinary pleasure, a stark reminder of the flavors you've missed. Historians still argue about the frequency with which common legionaries had access to such markets, with some suggesting it was very limited to avoid desertion or excessive fraternization, while others propose it was a deliberate strategy to boost morale and integrate the military with local economies. These excursions aren't just about filling your stomach, they're about war morale. Shapum. They provide a psychological break, a sense of connection to the wider civilian world from which you came. It's a chance to spend your hard-earned money on something tangible and enjoyable, something that offers a taste of home, or at least a taste of variety. So, as you walk through the vibrant market, perhaps carrying a small bag of fresh grapes or a piece of fragrant cheese, you feel a brief lightness in your step. These moments, when you step beyond the camp's walls for a culinary adventure, are rare pearls in the oyster of legionary life. Precious opportunities to remember that food can be more than just fuel. It can be a source of genuine delight. While the Roman legionary diet was remarkably efficient in providing basic calories and preventing widespread starvation, it was far from perfect. You've experienced the constant presence of pulmentum and hard bread, the scarcity of fresh produce, and the reliance on preserved foods. This often leads to a practical, though sometimes uncomfortable, reality. The digestive realities of such a consistently bland, fiber-rich, and repetitive diet. You might find your digestive system protesting at times. The sheer volume of fiber, Xiaomai from unrefined grains and legumes, while ultimately healthy, could certainly lead to some vigorous internal activity. Flatulence, bloating, and irregular bowel movements were likely common occurrences in the crowded conditions of the barracks or shared tents. Imagine the collective atmosphere after a particularly fibrous meal. It's a less glamorous aspect of military life, but an undeniable one. The lack of variety, especially in fresh fruits and vegetables, also had its consequences. While pasca and occasional foraging helped, the risk of saha, vitamin deficiencies, was ever present. Scurvy caused by a lack of vitamin C was a constant threat on long campaigns, manifesting as fatigue, bleeding gums, and eventually more severe symptoms. Your body might subtly crave fresh greens, a craving you learn to ignore out of necessity. Beyond deficiencies, the very nature of your diet meant a somewhat limited microbial diversity in your gut. Modern understanding of the gut microbiome suggests that a varied diet contributes to better overall health. While the Romans didn't have this concept, their consistent consumption of a few staple foods would have inevitably led to a less diverse internal ecosystem than a more varied diet. This isn't to say you were inherently unhealthy, but simply that your digestive system was likely operating within a more limited spectrum. Another factor was the consistent intake of eau de bar salt and porridge, crucial for preservation and hydration, but in large quantities it could lead to its own set of issues. While beneficial for electrolyte balance during exertion, excessive sodium intake without adequate water could contribute to thirst, and in the long term potentially kidney strain. Historians still argue about the prevalence and severity of gastrointestinal issues among Roman legionaries, with some scholars suggesting it was a major cause of non-combat incapacitation, while others emphasize the remarkable resilience of soldiers' bodies. A particularly quirky tidbit that touches on ancient Roman digestive remedies is the use of various herbs like mint or fennel smaindown for stomach ailments, or even the consumption of certain types of clay for diarrhea. While crude, these practices show an awareness of digestive discomfort and attempts to alleviate it. So, as you listen to the subtle rumblings of your own stomach, you understand that being a Roman legionary isn't just about external battles. It's also about the internal ones. Your body becomes a highly adapted machine capable of extracting maximum sustenance from a limited palate, but it's a process that comes with its own unique and often unglamorous digestive realities. Every gurgle and groan is a silent testament to the tireless work your body does to keep you fighting fit on a diet that is anything but luxurious. Having explored the minute details of your daily rations and the immediate digestive realities, let's zoom out to consider the broader picture, the long-term nutritional impact of this surprisingly bland diet on a Roman legionary. You're not just surviving day to day, you're living a lifestyle where this diet is your constant companion, shaping your body and your overall health for years, perhaps even decades. Despite its monotony and apparent simplicity, the core Roman legionary diet was, for its time, remarkably effective at sustaining a large, physically demanding fighting force. The emphasis on unrefined grains and legumes provided a consistent high-energy supply of complex carbohydrates and essential proteins. This meant that legionaries were generally well-fueled for the immense physical exertion required of them. The long marches, the constant training, the grueling construction work, and, of course, combat. You might not have been a gourmet, but you were certainly a well-oiled machine. The consistent intake of these staples likely meant that legionaries, at least those not suffering from acute illnesses or severe deprivation, avoided the extreme malnourishment seen in other ancient armies or populations. While meat was scarce, the combination of plant-based proteins supplemented by occasional fish or animal products provided a sufficient range of amino acids for muscle maintenance and repair. Your body, through sheer necessity and adaptation, became incredibly efficient at utilizing these basic foodstuffs. However, the lack of consistent fresh produce and varied protein sources did present long-term challenges. As we touched upon, vitamin deficiencies, particularly scurvy, would have been a recurring threat, especially during prolonged sieges or campaigns in regions where fresh food was unobtainable. This could lead to a gradual weakening of the body, increased susceptibility to illness, and slower wound healing. Historians still argue about the average lifespan and long-term health outcomes for a Roman legionary, with some archaeological evidence suggesting that while they were robust in their prime, signs of chronic conditions related to diet and physical stress were common in later life. Consider the wear and tear on your teeth, for instance. A diet heavy in coarse grains, often with grit from primitive milling processes, would have taken a toll. Dental health was likely a significant long-term issue, leading to tooth loss and abscesses, which in turn could impact overall health and the ability to consume sufficient food. A particularly quirky tidbit is the archaeological discovery of hardened dental calculus plaque on Roman soldier remains, which often contains microscopic traces of their diet, including cereal grains and occasionally even specific plant fibers, offering direct evidence of their food intake. Ultimately, the Roman legionary diet created hardy, resilient individuals capable of enduring immense physical stress. You might not have enjoyed every meal, and your body might have borne the subtle long-term effects of a restricted menu, but it was a diet engineered for function and conquest. It allowed the Roman Empire to project its power across vast distances, fueled by the steady, unglamorous, but undeniably effective energy of grains and legumes, a testament to the fact that brute strength often comes from surprisingly simple sustenance. In the harsh and unpredictable life of a Roman legionary, where every day could bring new challenges from skirmishes to disease, there's a certain somber reflection that inevitably arises, the thought of a legionary's last meal. Chait. It's not a grand ceremonial affair, no Last Supper with chosen delicacies. More often than not, it would be as simple, as unadorned, and as functional as every meal that preceded it, perhaps eaten under the most dire circumstances. Imagine the scenario: you're on campaign deep in enemy territory, or perhaps holding a desperate defensive line. There's no time for special provisions, no opportunity for a market visit. Your last meal would be dictated by immediate availability. It would likely be the very same dry, hard bread you've gnawed on for months, perhaps a handful of toasted grains and a sip of your ubiquitous Posca pea. The taste would be familiar, almost comforting in its monotony, even as your mind grapples with the gravity of the moment. It might be eaten hastily, crammed into your mouth between shouted commands or the clang of distant steel. The grim reality is that a legionary's death was often sudden and violent, leaving no opportunity for a final contemplative meal. Your last sustenance might have been a half-eaten piece of bread dropped during a charge, or a final swig of Posca, taken before an ambush. There's a poignant simplicity to this, a reflection of a life constantly on the edge, utterly devoid of pretense. In a siege or during a period of severe deprivation, that last meal might even be the last few crumbs from a dwindling ration stretched beyond recognition. The desperate hunger would dull any sense of taste, focusing solely on the primal act of consumption for sheer survival. Historians still argue about the psychological impact of such a monotonous diet on a soldier's morale, especially when faced with prolonged stress or the imminence of battle. Did the familiarity of the food offer a strange comfort, or did its blandness merely amplify the bleakness of their situation? A particularly quirky tidbit comes from anecdotal accounts of some Roman soldiers carrying small amulets or charms in their ration bags, hoping for protection or good fortune. While not edible, these small personal items might have been clutched during a final meal, a silent prayer for survival or a quick end. This stark simplicity of a legionary's last meal is a powerful testament to their disciplined existence. It underscores the unromantic reality of ancient warfare, where even the most basic human needs were met with unyielding practicality. There's no grand gesture, no final feast, just the raw necessities of life consumed until the very moment that life might be extinguished. It's a sobering thought, a quiet whisper in the night of the ultimate sacrifice made by countless legionaries, fueled to the very end by the unyielding though unexciting diet of Rome. As the echoes of your journey through the Roman legionaries' mess hall begin to fade, you can't help but notice how elements of their surprisingly bland diet continue to resonate, perhaps subtly, perhaps profoundly, in our own modern culinary practices. Echoes of ancient eating linger in unexpected places, connecting your humble ciaun pulmentum to the dishes on your own table tonight. Think about the sheer enduring power of grains and legumes. Your daily pulmentum. That thick porridge of wheat or barley is fundamentally similar to gruels, porridges and stews still consumed globally as staple foods. Oats, rice, corn. Countless cultures rely on these simple, energy-rich carbohydrates as their nutritional bedrock, just as the Romans did. And those humble lentils and chickpeas. They're celebrated today for their protein and fiber, central to vegetarian and vegan diets worldwide. The Roman legionary knew their value millennia ago out of necessity. The concept of fermented foods also lives on. While garum might not grace your dinner table in its original pungent form, its umami-rich essence finds modern parallels in soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, and even fish sauce, popular in many Asian cuisines. That powerful savory flavor derived from fermentation is a testament to an ancient ingenuity in making bland food exciting. And the idea of pickling or salting for preservation, so crucial to the Legionary's ability to store meat and vegetables, is still a fundamental method in our kitchens today, from brined olives to cured meats. Even the far practicality of a one-pot meal. A staple of Legionary camp cooking resonates with modern batch cooking and slow cooker recipes. The idea of simmering hearty ingredients together for sustained nourishment remains a timeless approach to feeding large groups or simply simplifying life. Historians still argue whether the Roman military diet inadvertently influenced the development of peasant or rustic cuisines across Europe, with some scholars suggesting a direct lineage of simplicity and reliance on durable ingredients. A particularly quirky tidbit is the historical impact of the Roman road network, built in part to facilitate supply lines for the legionaries, which inadvertently helped spread Roman agricultural practices and dietary staples, like wheat and olive oil, across vast regions, permanently altering local food cultures wherever the legions marched. Your diet, therefore, literally paved the way for culinary exchange. So as the night deepens and your mind settles, consider the profound legacy of those Roman soldiers and their simple meals. Their practical, resilient diet, born of necessity and efficiency, laid nutritional foundations that in various forms still sustain us. It reminds us that sometimes the most basic sustenance can be the most enduring, echoing through history, from a dusty Roman camp to the quiet comfort of your own home. The Legionary's meal, once a mere necessity, now offers a quiet lesson in history, resilience, and the timeless nature of how we feed ourselves. Now, let your mind drift from the marching boots and the scent of wood smoke. Feel the gentle pull of sleep, a soft tide washing over you. The echoes of ancient meals and distant drums are fading, now replaced by the quiet rhythm of your own breath. You are safe, warm, and well-fed, a stark contrast to the Legionary's hearty existence. Let the soft hum of the fan or the quiet stillness of the room carry you deeper into slumber. All the history, all the stories will be here waiting for you in the morning. Just close your eyes, relax your body, and allow yourself to sink into a peaceful, dreamless sleep. Rest well. Sweet dreams.